Well, the war's also drawn in other powers in the region. Turkey says NATO air defences intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile fired towards its airspace on Wednesday. Iran denies firing at Turkey. Ankara is calling for diplomacy, but also finds itself walking a tightrope between its NATO ally, the United States, and its powerful neighbour, Iran.
In response to US-Israeli strikes, Iran has hit targets across the Middle East.
But one neighbour has mostly stayed out of the crosshairs, Turkey, until now.
Ankara said a ballistic missile launched from Iran was intercepted and destroyed as it approached Turkish airspace. No one was injured.
But it's the first time the widening conflict has come this close to Turkey, a NATO member.
We're taking every precaution and intervening immediately in close consultation with our NATO allies. We're also issuing the clearest possible warnings to prevent similar incidents from happening again.
Iran says it didn't target Turkey, but still, this could signal a dangerous escalation. Why is that? And what does Ankara have at stake?
Turkey hosts several highly sensitive NATO military sites and an unspecified number of US troops. One of the most important is Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, a key NATO facility that has hosted US forces for decades. These are the kind of places Tehran has long warned it would target in the event of an American attack.
So what is holding Iran back?
The easy answer is NATO membership and Article 5.
Turkey is not just another country in the region. It has one of NATO's largest militaries, and a direct attack on Turkish territory could trigger NATO's collective defense clause, bringing the entire alliance into the conflict.
But there's more to it than NATO.
The real reason is that Turkey and Iran have something no other pairing has in this region. They have interdependency, the energy pipelines, and a shared border. So that wiring is different between Turkey and Iran compared to any other nation in the region.
Despite being regional rivals, Turkey and Iran are also deeply connected, and both sides have historically tried to avoid direct confrontation.
That helps explain why Ankara has carefully calibrated its response to the conflict.
Turkish President Erdogan has criticized the US-Israeli strikes as illegal and expressed condolences for the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Turkey also denied its territory and airspace would be used for operations against Iran. But Erdogan also condemned Iran's retaliatory attacks and urged all sides to de-escalate.
Our priority is to achieve a ceasefire and open the door to dialogue. Let me be very clear. If the necessary intervention is not made, the conflict will have serious consequences for regional and global security.
And there is another reason why Ankara wants to avoid further escalation: geography.
Turkey shares a more than 500-kilometer border with Iran. Instability on the other side could result in new refugee flows, economic disruption, and security concerns linked to Kurdish militant groups operating in Iran.
Risks that would be difficult for Turkey to manage. So for now, Ankara is trying to strike a delicate balance.
Avoid being drawn into the conflict while preserving functional relations with both its NATO ally Washington and its neighbor Tehran.
That positions Turkey as the only NATO capital that can still speak to Tehran, Washington, and the Gulf all at the same time. The moment Turkey becomes a belligerent, that value disappears. And Iran knows this, Washington knows this, and President Erdogan is making sure everyone keeps knowing it.
For now, Turkey may be safer than others in the region, but that could change as the conflict is becoming increasingly unpredictable.
Asli Aydintasbas is a fellow at the Brookings Institution, where she's director of the Turkey Project. She's also a senior associate fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to DW. Where lots of European leaders have been equivocal about this war, Turkey's President Erdogan, has left people in no doubt where he stands.
Well, Turkey is doing some type of a balancing act. It has condemned Iran's attacks on neighbors in Gulf countries, but also condemned the killing of Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader. Clearly, it does not want to get sucked into this war. Turkey wanted to prevent the war. It was very active in the diplomacy in the run-up to the war, but now seems to be very adamant about staying out of it. There is the usual fear of migration flows, but also great concern about instability inside Iran and ethnic fighting and civil war that might come from a change of mission on the part of the United States to regime change. What initially started out as something that was intended to take down Iran's ballistic and nuclear capabilities now increasingly is looking like a regime change operation based on statements from American and Israeli officials. That means Turkey is bracing for a long-term instability and wants to make sure that it does not get targeted by Iran, also wants to make sure that Iran's internal implosion does not affect Turkey, especially in terms of migration flows and the emergence of a Kurdish self-rule experiment or autonomy.
Okay, so Turkey has a lot to lose if this American adventure goes wrong, or indeed just continues, because nobody seems to know where it's going to end. But before this...
no one knows.
Sorry, go on. Please go on.
Indeed, no one knows where it will end because there seems to be a shifting goalpost that's evident from President Trump's own statements in the planning phase, something that started out under different circumstances to curb Iran's nuclear capabilities is now an open-ended situation. And as you say, Turkey is scared of that.
And so before this war started, how would you have characterized the relationship between Iran and Turkey?
It's a very curious relationship. These countries have been obviously neighbors for centuries, and their border is among the oldest borders between any country. They're not allies or friends. They've been historic rivals as the strongest Shia and the strongest Sunni states in the neighborhood. They have also fought various proxy battles in Syria and Iraq and so on. But at the end of the day, their relationship rests on one principle, which is not interfering in each other's internal affairs. So Turkey is very careful not to change that long-standing policy. And when I say long-standing, I mean a policy that has been pretty much the cornerstone for the past 400 years. They're not enemies with Tehran. They have no sympathy. They are scared of Iran's nuclear program. They have concerns about the ballistic missiles, but they don't want to be the ones that get involved in overthrowing that regime.
Okay, so both sides sort of want to preserve the status quo, Iran and Turkey. You don't mess with us, we'll stay out of your business. And yet, NATO brought down what was believed to be an Iranian missile yesterday, which was thought to be headed for Turkey.
That's right. The missile was undoubtedly heading for Turkey, possibly to a NATO base in Turkey. There are no official statements confirming that, but it's not hard to see from the map where it was heading. Turkey issued a very strong warning to Iran. I think that they're going to try to get Iran not to attack Turkey. So far, Iranians have only violated that airspace one time. But yes, this has also shown Turkey's the importance of NATO in Turkey's defense. Turkey has been in NATO since the 50s, and the relationship has been fraught with tension over the past decade or so because of various reasons, and Turkey had been seeking some sense of strategic autonomy. But when it comes to war, it's very obvious that it was NATO's air defense systems that were able to stop Iranian missiles.
Now, you mentioned earlier that one of the things Turkey wants no truck with is this notion of Kurdish separatism. And yesterday there were reports, which the White House denied, that the CIA was actually in talks with Kurdish forces to try and foment some sort of popular uprising in Iran. So how is that likely to have gone down in Ankara?
I think this is a chance of blowing up the Turkish-US relations and really strain Turkey's ties with NATO. It does look like as the Trump administration changes its goals in Iran, seeking for a longer-term regime change operation, they're also reaching to the shelves for plans that are out there. And one of these is what the template that was used in the Iraq war or the Syrian war, going for an alliance with Kurdish groups, Kurdish militia groups, in order to bring about either a safe zone, carve out a no-fly zone, or create a liberated area, giving some sense of Kurdish autonomy. This is something that truly freaks out Turkey. It's something that Ankara has long opposed. They don't want a greater Kurdistan project on their borders, but also the fact that it may be that the group that is strongest inside Iran, the Iranian Kurdish group that is strongest, is actually a PKK offshoot called PEJAK. That United States, once again, going back to the Syrian template and starting to work with a PKK offshoot is something that truly, I think, terrifies Ankara and has a chance of straining relations with the United States.
Whichever way this war goes, the medium to long-term prognosis seems to be chaos and instability. Is Turkey able to influence that outcome?
Not yet. I think for the longest time, Turkish government thought there was a difference, a big divergence between Trump's goals and Israel's goals. Trump being more transactional and ready to do a deal with anyone, and Israel seeking a longer-term operation and regime change. Now it's that distinction is looking less and less clear, I think, to anyone watching the Trump administration. Clearly, President Trump is also leaning in the direction of a regime change. I think Turkish government understands that Trump can change his views, and they'll be ready, if and when that happens, to propose some type of a Venezuela formula and re-enter diplomacy, at least try to negotiate whatever is left of the Iranian regime, the current leaders, and push for some type of a de-escalation and off-ramp. But right now, at least from Washington, it does not look like an imminent plan. I think that it's more of a long-term, open-ended, chaotic scenario is what the Trump administration is going for.
Thanks for talking us through that. Asli Aydintasbas from the Brookings Institution and the European Council on Foreign Relations.
Thank you.